Welcome to Execution and Decision Making with Anthony Flynn, who is an author, he's a speaker, as well as an advocate for equality in education. Anthony is also the CEO of Faith Work Connections, where he leads his team in the mission to build faith and career skills for the marketplace. He is the author of the Execution Pipeline. It is a step-by-step guide to moving your business ahead from dream to reality. Anthony is also the co-author of Happiness Map, Finding Fulfillment in Life and Work. Let's welcome Anthony Flynn.
Hello, my name is Anthony Flynn, and I'm the founder of Amazing CEO, where our mission is to increase the productivity, profitability, and sustainability for CEOs and key executives. We work with companies, everything from Fortune 500 companies down to small businesses and even independent entrepreneurs who are in the startup phase. And we welcome you today. And today I want to talk to you about execution and your decision making.
Facts win. In decision making, gathering facts is a must before making a decision. Anthony shares how he makes decisions and what he has learned from executives.
Some of the things that come to mind for me when I'm thinking about decision making are the following. So one of the first things that comes to mind for me is I work with a lot of CEOs and key executives and some of the most high performing people in the world. And one of the things that I've seen that they do, that we have in common, that I do, that they do, is the fact that they create space in their lives when they're up against and pressed up against major decisions. So one of the challenges that many leaders have is the fact that they're running all the time and they don't really create space to have room to breathe and room to think and room to innovate. And so one of the first things I want to throw out is, as you are preparing to make a major decision in your life, it could be relative to life, it could be relative to business, it could be relative to a major family decision, whatever the case, I want to challenge you to pull back and create some space to actually think. A second thought that I want to attach to that is the notion that I want to challenge you to actually take the time to write out your thoughts. So for example, I'm up against a major decision. I want you to outline the pros and the cons. What are the best things that could possibly happen if I make the decision I'm leaning into? And what are the absolute worst things that can possibly happen if I make the decision that I'm leaning into? All right, so that's the second point. Here's a third point that I want to throw out. Once you have made your list, once you've created space to think through your decision-making process, once you've created your list of pros and cons, another thing I want to throw out to you is for you to actually surround yourself with 3 to 5 people in your life that you trust specifically on the topic in which you're about to make a decision. So for example, if I'm making a financial decision, I'm not necessarily, or I don't prefer to recommend that you go to someone that isn't necessarily a financial expert, as an example, right? So think about the lane, the vertical in which you're about to make your decision, and then try to surround yourself with people in your life who fall within the context of that vertical, who have experience in that vertical, and people that you trust to support you and give you insight and direction in your decision-making process. And so there's a lot of other things that I could share with you, but here's my final thing that I'm going to say about that. Once you have gone through those steps that I just shared, the final thing is for you to do your very best to not make a decision just based upon how you feel, but to actually go through the process of framing the decision through what's in black and white. I want you to frame it through what the facts are that you're laying up against when you're preparing to step out and make that decision. All right. And so I hope that those 4 principles will help you. There's a ton of other things I could have shared, but I hope you'll take those 4 principles as you lean forward into making your next major decision.
You know, as a leader, execution management is a priority. Showing your team how you deliver gives them a real-time guide to follow. Here are ways that leaders have been successful and how bottlenecking can be prevented while holding your team accountable. Let's listen.
As I think about execution management and some of the best ways to prevent bottlenecking, one of the first things that comes to mind for me might surprise you. And that first thing is you need to lead with executing how you want the people around you to execute. So start with the fact of whether or not you are actually getting up and step by step delivering on what your job responsibility is on a day-to-day basis. Because guess what? The people around you are watching you. I like to say that leadership is more caught than taught. Okay. And so my challenge to you as a leader is that make sure you're leading by example and make sure that whatever you're asking your team to do from an effort, energy, and efficiency vantage point, that you're actually leading by example, that the team looks at you as the act to follow and not the other way around. All right. So execution management starts with you as an individual leader leading the pack. The second thought is make sure that you have a structure in place where you can hold your team accountable on an ongoing basis. In many organizations that I've worked with, there's 6-month review processes or even 1-year review processes. I'm a fan of having weekly coaching opportunities with the leaders around you, not for the sake of simply patting them on the hand on an ongoing basis. The accountability stands out when you can have dialogues with the leaders who report to you on an ongoing basis so that you can course correct throughout the week in order to help them move in the direction of efficiency and effectiveness on an ongoing basis. So again, lead by example, making sure that you are efficient and effective and that your energy is maximized, but then also put systems and processes in place so that in fact the leaders around you have a way to get feedback, to give feedback, and to respond on an ongoing basis. And then finally, make sure that you incentivize your leaders on an ongoing basis. Okay, it's critically important that leaders, just as they may sometimes have to hear some constructive feedback and challenges from you, make sure that you incent them to keep moving forward. Bottlenecks can get created if leaders feel defeated, if the culture and the climate feels oppressive or suppressing. So what you want to do is create an energy in your culture that makes leaders feel empowered and create an energy in your culture that incents them to want to keep moving forward. People have hard days. People have bad days. There are rainy days. There are snowy days. There are sunny days too. But what about the rainy days and the snowy days that people experience where they just have a tough time getting the motor going? It's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that you incentivize them to not allow the bottleneck effect to take into effect and that you keep pushing them in the direction that you want your organization to go. All right. And so when I think about effective execution management, those are just some of the principles that I like to leave with you.
We can all agree that innovation is a powerful tool when it comes to differentiation. As a leader, you always need to think about how to improve, how to go above and beyond to innovate. Innovation is growth, and growth has pain points, right? So Anthony gives us some sound advice on innovating and breaking barriers. Let's listen really closely.
So when I think about innovation and some of the best ways to break barriers when it comes to innovation, one of the first things that comes to mind for me is the notion of never allowing a barrier to exist in the first place. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I have learned in my life that being a constant learner, reader in today's climate, podcasts, watching videos on YouTube and other options where I can constantly grow and stretch myself, stretch my mind, stretch my thinking patterns. My goal on a daily basis is to never get caught in a situation where there are barriers to innovation. And so my philosophy is, as long as you are a continuous learner, a continuous reader, a continuous viewer, as long as you're using what I call your eye gates, your ear gates, etc., in an appropriate manner, then guess what? There's a greater possibility that you will not run into a major barrier that will prevent you from innovating. But however, let's suggest that you do run into a barrier that all of a sudden stifles innovation. One of the first things I want to throw out to you as a recommendation is to begin thinking about the type of problem or the space and innovation that you're leaning into and start looking at alternatives outside of you. Study, do case studies, and go and look for patterns in other leaders, organizations, companies, etc., that have hit similar walls in the past and figured out a way to get beyond those walls, okay? And so this is a tactic that many companies don't necessarily want to tap into, because there's this notion that I'm looking at my competitor, right? And there are times when it's actually appropriate to look at your competitor, because there actually may be spaces and places where your competitor is outdoing you. And so there's a chance for you to look at your competitor, see where their strengths are, see where some of their areas of opportunity are, and then figure out ways you can actually tap into those areas of opportunity. Finally, one more thought that I want to leave you as it pertains to innovation and breaking barriers when it comes to innovation is to make sure that you have what I call a U Inc. board of directors. And that U Inc. is U Inc., right? I keep people in my life who I'm constantly meeting with that can sharpen me on an ongoing basis. There are times when I speak to them one-on-one, and then there are times when I will bring this small group of people that are leaders in my life together in a small community, have lunch with them, have dinner with them, have breakfast with them, go on retreats with them, so that they can pour into me. And they're people that I feel I can learn from on an ongoing basis. They're 10 years, 20 years my senior. One example is a really close friend of mine who was a Fortune 200 CEO. I have a company that consults CEOs and key executives. So naturally, one of the first things I thought about when I was launching my company was to identify people who had 20, 30 years of experience over me running major corporations. And I spend a lot of quality time leaning on them, getting insight from them, learning how they broke barriers, learning about the barriers they ran into, etc., so that I could bring some of those conversations, topics, ideas into my dialogues with my clients, with the companies I serve, with the individuals I serve. And so, look, I want to challenge you. Think about ways you can break out of the box based upon some of the thoughts I just shared. And look, I look forward to seeing you innovate and break barriers on an ongoing basis in your organization. Go get your dreams.
Networking is one of the keys to success for all of us, right? But how can you network more effectively and gain relationships that add value? Anthony's going to tell us how.
When I think about ways to improve how we network, a couple of thoughts come to mind for me. But before I even get into those thoughts, let me start by saying that networking is a term that I hear used very loosely on an ongoing basis. And in many cases, what I've noticed is that when people are going out to network, it's transactional in nature. They're looking simply to get something. And so when I think about networking and the improvement of networking in today's climate, I want to challenge you to think about two things. I want to challenge you first to think about service over self. All right, service over self. And so from a service over self vantage point, here's the point. One of the best ways that I've been able to get in touch with some of the key leaders that I work with, I've been tremendously blessed, you all, to work with professional athletes and entertainers and literally some of the top CEOs in the world, some of the top CEOs and key executives in the world. And one of the ways I've been able to do that is by looking at ways that I can serve people when I'm coming into circles. So whenever I walk in a room, one of the first thoughts I think about is there a way for me to add value to the room? Not to suck life and air out of the room, but to add value to the room. Is there something? Because listen, people who stand in some of the top seats in our country and in our organizations and in our companies, these people get pulled on all the time. And so one train of thought is counterintuitive, but it's to think, okay, if I know that I'm stepping into a room where everybody is attacking leaders like sharks, I want to separate myself and differentiate myself by not being transactional, but actually trying to offer up a transformational relationship. All right. And one way to do that is to figure out ways you can actually add value and serve the room, not take from the room. So the first thought is service over self. It's okay that you go in with some form of an ambition to get something out of the relationship, but the key is that you don't sacrifice the entire relationship through the vein of selfishness, and that you're simply just taking without giving as much, if not more, than you actually take. So the first point is service over self. The second point is somewhat tied to the first point, and that is people over profit. So to get very specifically into business with this topic, I want to challenge you. Don't see money and dollar signs when you look at people. I want to challenge you to see people as human beings. And when you see them, look at them as people. Look at them as human beings who have their own struggles, who have their own challenges, who are walking through life. And just like you have some struggles and challenges in your life, they're human just like you. So what if there was a way for you to see them as a human being and not as a dollar symbol? Okay. And is there a way when you're engaging people in a networking environment, is there a way to tap into the human that they are, to add value to them as a human being first? And over time, in my experience, I've actually learned that by adding value, by seeing people through the lens of service and seeing people through the lens of people and not profit, over time, the relationship manifests and everybody wins. All right. And so that's my challenge to you. If you want to continue to network and do it effectively, service over self and people over profit, go get your dreams, friend. God bless.